Gugu Mbatha-Raw is a British actor and UNHCR high-profile supporter. After studying at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, she began acting in British television and stage productions. She was appointed Member of the Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II in the 2017 birthday honours for her services to the dramatic arts. She is interviewed by Renuka Matil, Managing Editor of Forbes Women Africa and Forbes Africa.
British actor Gugu Mbatha-Raw has been known for award-winning roles in films such as Belle, Beyond the Lights and Black Mirror. Most recently, she's acted in films such as Misbehaviour and The Morning Show. In addition, she's also been a great advocate for the rights of refugee women, working as a high-profile supporter of UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, since 2018. Gugu also has a strong Africa connection with South African roots, and she joins us today at the 6th Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit, all the way from the UK. Great to have you here with us, Gugu. It's absolutely fantastic and an honor to be speaking to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Now, you've had an exciting decades with many, many big films. Even in the height of the pandemic last year, where just as the world was waking up to the pandemic, you had a release which was Misbehaviour, and in which you played a Miss World in the 1970s. The film touched on issues of feminism, the women's lib movement of the 70s. And there have been many stellar roles that you've acted in, even in the British period drama, where you played a very leading, where you played the lead of a very strong character. And there have been so many such roles down the line. How do you pick these films? What attracts you to them? And in life too, I mean, how have you managed to change stereotypes and break the rules?
It's interesting. I think it's just the stories I've been drawn to. You know, for me, it's such a privilege to be an actor. It's such a privilege to tell stories. I like to feel like there's for me, if there's a message there, it's great. Obviously there's escapism is wonderful too, but you know, when you speak of something like Misbehaviour, you know, it was a very tough time to have a film come out in the world in the conventional sense, in the cinema last year, obviously, but it was great that the film was still able to be viewed online, and that film, you know, had so many contemporary resonances with the women's movement and you know, the intersectionality of representation, for my character being the first woman of colour to win Miss World, and an interesting South African connection as well, because the woman that won second place actually was the first woman of colour from South Africa to be entered into the competition. So it was resonant for me on many levels. But you know, you mentioned Belle as well, which was my first lead in a film, and I think it really was since playing that role that I've had more access to or a bit more choice in the material that I've got to work on. I think when you first start as an actor, you're just very excited to have a job because it's, you know, a notoriously competitive industry. And I think, you know, for me, I've been really fortunate enough to have ample opportunities. And I think when you have more opportunities, obviously you begin to think more, you interrogate more, what are you actually saying? What are you actually saying with the work you're putting out there? And I think, you know, there's so many other things we could all be doing with our time, as we've seen in the pandemic, you know, from, you know, nursing and doctors and essential workers. And for me, I feel like with acting, you know, for it to feel worthwhile, it's always more fulfilling if I feel like it's contributing something to society, be it the conversations raised or, you know, the themes, or it's uplifting and empowering people in some way.
There's often an important cause of message in some of your films, and Belle, as you mentioned, is such a beautiful British period drama. But you've been dancing since a very young age. From the age of 4, you've been learning ballet dancing, and you've also went to drama school at the age of 18. How have you always wanted to take to acting?
I think I have, to be honest with you. I think growing up as an only child, for me, my mum took me to ballet when I was 4, and in a way it was an opportunity for me to socialize with other children, which is why I feel for youngsters growing up now, in isolation in many places in the world because of COVID-19. I think for me, I didn't have playmates at home, so my playmates became my sort of friends that I would meet in theatre clubs or after school at dancing classes, and so for me that was really just fun and joyful and a way to express myself. And my mum was a nurse, and I knew that her job was really challenging and obviously a very worthwhile profession, but I know that it was tough, and I remember watching her growing up, and I remember thinking, oh, I really want to be able to do a job that I really enjoy. Wouldn't it be amazing if I could make my hobby my job? So in many ways I've been really fortunate.
You've also been an important advocate for refugee women. And the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, has just now proclaimed you the Goodwill Ambassador for them. That's indeed a great honor, I'm sure, for you. But why have you been wanting to be so involved in this issue? Is this something that has been close to your heart? And in Africa, as you know, there's 35 million displaced people in the world are in Africa, and you've been to Africa as well. Could you just tell us some more about these experiences?
Yes, I mean, it's a huge honor to be made a Goodwill Ambassador, and I, as you mentioned, I've been working with UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, for nearly 3 years now, and getting to go on some trips with them to see the work that they do on the ground. Initially, my first trip was to Rwanda, and getting to meet communities and settlements and camps of refugee women, and really understanding their personal stories was hugely eye-opening to me. And for me, as you mentioned, my dad's from South Africa, and many of my family have been affected by the legacy of apartheid and displaced, and due to the politics of the country at the time. And so for me, there was sort of personal resonances in understanding what it means to flee your home, or what it means to not feel welcome in your home or feel free in your home. And also, I think it's, especially with COVID-19 now and climate change, the world is dealing with so many huge shifts, and refugees really are the most vulnerable. And I think for me, it's about, humanizing their stories. They're just like us. There are, as you said, there are so many refugees in the world, and to be able to really have empathy and understanding, because with all things, and again with the pandemic, nobody is fully safe until we're all safe, and so to ensure that the most vulnerable communities like refugees are represented and supported alongside that is really important to me.
So in Uganda, you mentioned Uganda, you've also spent time with refugee women who've been affected and who've survived conflict-related sexual violence. What was that experience like, Gugu?
It was incredibly moving. I met one amazing woman called Francoise in Uganda on my trip, and she'd been through the most horrendous experiences, on multiple occasions over many years since the Rwandan genocide, having lost her family and just experienced such terrible violence, and yet she was not beaten by it. Her spirit was incredible. She was so resilient, and she had become a counsellor, and then she had become a teacher. And when I met her, was this incredibly vibrant community leader who was really engaging with young women and women's groups. Really, she'd fostered a young girl who she was bringing up. And she was just so engaged in her community and teaching young people, from dance classes to girls football team, and there was just something so inspiring to know that in spite of it all she was still able to give back, and that really moved me. I mean, I'll never forget her, and understanding her resilience was really incredibly inspiring to me.
And just when the world shut down last year, I mean, you used at that time, the downtime during the lockdown, to also express yourself in another way. Some beautiful pieces of art that you've painted, George Floyd, they're just gorgeous, Breonna Taylor. Could you take us through why you started dabbling in art and painted those powerful pieces? What drew you to that art form?
I think art was always something that I loved to do growing up, and I think before I got into acting, I was sort of torn between art and acting, and I thought that I would do acting. Seemed a bit more of a collaborative art form to me, and less sort of introverted and lonely as my painting sometimes is. But come the pandemic, of course, when I couldn't act and we were all forced to be at home and sort of pause, I think I was in a very, very fortunate position to be at home and safe, and I really wanted, sort of twofold really, I needed to express myself creatively, and I was also missing my friends, so I started by sort of painting my friends initially, and that was a nice way for me to sort of connect with them and just sort of rekindle the artistic painting sort of skills, and then things, and then I painted Francoise and other people that had a meaningful impact in my life, and then when things started to shift sort of socially and politically in the US, where I was at the time, in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement and of course the murder of George Floyd in the spring, I was painting every day, and so when that happened, it was really it was such a shocking experience. So yeah, I'm really fortunate to have had that outlet. I think it's very important. I think when we're sort of in this strange time and value systems are shifting and we're being forced to pause, and some people are working harder than ever, and obviously, but certainly my industry was forced to pause, and for me it was quite healing and therapeutic to be able to still feel like I was expressing myself in a way, and then to be able to post some of the images on social media and the conversation around them too.
Cathartic indeed, Gugu. How have you managed to bring that positive energy to the acting stage? I'm sure you must have resumed work, and we hear of some very exciting projects coming up for you this year.
For me, in terms of bringing sort of positivity, I think that is really the only choice we have. I think it's so easy to get overwhelmed with everything that's going on in the world, and I think in terms of the pandemic, in terms of myself living in a relatively unstable industry, I'm used to instability in career-wise, but obviously there is this sort of unity of the whole world, feeling that things are shifting, and there is a sort of instability, but I do think there's always a lesson or something to draw on from these experiences. So yeah, I was working on a TV series for Disney Plus called Loki, which is part of the Marvel universe. I was working on that last year when the pandemic hit. But we have been able to finish the show, so I'm really excited that is coming out, I think, in May. although a lot of the details are still under wraps. But that's the next thing that'll be coming out, and also I'm about to start filming a book adaptation called The Girl Before here in the UK. And obviously, you know, my work as a Goodwill Ambassador, I really hope to continue to travel when it's safe to do so, continue to travel to Africa and Southern Africa and learn more about UNHCR's work.
So a new Marvel film and more exciting projects coming up. That's certainly not the last we're seeing of Gugu Mbatha-Raw. Thank you so much, Gugu, for joining us today at the Leading Women Summit, and we really thank you for your presence and your participation. Good luck.